Hello, and thanks for joining us. My name is Anita McCuitt, and I'm the president-elect of the Canadian Club of Toronto, and it's great to have you with us today for the State of the Skies. We can all see for ourselves there are way fewer planes flying overhead, and many of us have had to cancel business or pleasure travel, and personally, my family is very sad that we had to cancel a trip that we've long been looking forward to. And out of all the sectors that have been affected by COVID-19, travel is among the hardest hit around the globe. Today, we've gathered a great panel of experts to discuss how North America's airlines are handling this tough reality. And we look forward to hearing from the panel in just a minute. Here at the Canadian Club, we've also been forced to change the way that we live and work. It's our mandate to engage Canadians on the issues that matter most. And it's something that we've done for the past 123 years. Person for the moment, we've quickly adapted to bring the speakers to you. We're delighted that so many of you have joined today. This is clearly a popular topic. Before we dive into today's panel, here is some key information about how you can participate with us. So first, there's a click here to switch stream button, which helps you if you find that your internet is slow. The video quality may decrease, but the audio will stay strong. If you have a question for our panelists, just click the questions tab and you can enter your questions in the window and they'll be sent to our moderator. The request help button located at the bottom right corner of the page is for technical support. So one of the club's traditions that has not changed is the toast that we make to our nation. And usually we do this in person with the raising of a glass. So we'll attempt to do this virtually today. If you have something to drink nearby, let's raise it, make a nod towards the screen and toast to Canada.
Canada.
To Canada.
Canada.
Thank you for doing that, my American friends. And now it's time to introduce our panelists. Helane Becker is a managing director and senior research analyst for airlines, air freight, and aircraft leasing at Cowen. We have Jim Butler, senior vice president, airport operations and cargo for American Airlines. Tim Strauss is vice president of cargo at Air Canada. Mark Williams is president of Sunwing Airlines. And today's moderator is Amber Kanwar, anchor on BNN Bloomberg. Amber, I'll turn the Canadian Club podium over to you.
Anita, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who is taking time out of, I guess, what would be your lunch break if we were all in our offices to listen to this call. As Anita was saying, certainly air travel has been one of the most hardest hit sectors. And today our goal is to try and help you understand what the future might look like and how top executives from across North America are thinking about what a new normal looks like. But I guess before we delve into the future, we have to talk about what's going on right now and how these executives are really triaging a situation that is so fluid and so disparate around the world. So I'm really excited to have this conversation about this. And I guess to introduce who we have Mark Williams of Sunwing, Jim Butler of American, Tim Strauss of Air Canada, and Helane Becker of Cowen, whose job it is to kind of look at the overall sector for investors. And I think, Mark, if I can, I'd like to start with you. At Sunwing, you send people to sunny destinations. Last year, you did 4 million passengers, and now you're sitting at 0. Talk me through those early days of when the crisis was unfolding and when you really realized you had to take that decision to go down to halting all of your operations.
Yeah, Amber, thank you. And it's a great question, and I'm also pleased to be participating on this panel. If you think about the temporary suspension of an operation the size of Sunwing, it's a massive challenge. But when I look at what's happened since the virus really started to pick up in mid-March, the efforts we've been doing have changed multiple times already, even during this short period of time. So on the 17th of March, we decided, after the government was expressing more and more concern about travel, that we would stop sending anyone else south on vacation. And then our entire focus for a week was bringing Canadians back home. So at the beginning of the week, we had about 70,000 Canadians in destination, and we started operating empty flights down and full flights back to bring them back. One of the first things we did as well, after the Prime Minister mentioned that a lot of other Canadians were trapped in destination, we decided to offer free seats to any Canadian who was unable to get back once our plane was full of our own passengers. So people would go to the airport, they were on standby, and if there was room on the plane, we would bring them back. And we brought over 3,000 people back with that offer of the free seats. Had some very nice stories with people thanking us after, thinking that there was some kind of a trick and they were going to get to the airport and have to pay some money or something else would happen. And they were truly surprised that we were able to bring people back from many different places in the Caribbean and Mexico back to Canada. We then started focusing on, sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish the thought.
We then started focusing on, how do we then shrink this down? It was really clear that no one with the type of travel we were doing was going to continue going south. So we quickly made the decision that we would temporarily suspend operations. And then there's a lot of work that goes into that, bringing the planes, parking them, putting on a maintenance program, and managing through that piece. And that, that took another week or so. And in the meantime, now as an industry, we're really looking for liquidity from the government. We're at the stage now, even, Tim at Air Canada, although they're still doing some flying, it's a massive, massive reduction. And we're now asking the government to step up with a financial package to support the airlines in Canada, as has been done in US and other jurisdictions as well.
Well, Mark, you bring up an interesting point about government support, and we definitely will get to that. But you also kind of highlighted that at the beginning, while you were focused about okay, what does this mean for the company? You also had a service to perform for the country. And I know that that's kind of an important role for American as well as Air Canada. But Jim, for American Airlines, I guess as you were having these meetings, I wonder, and employees must have been wondering this too, how do you answer the question, are you going to survive this?
Yeah, it's very tough. Obviously, first of all, thanks very much for the opportunity. It's unprecedented times, and our team really sees that. And so we have, and we as many know that we only exist as an airline because of the incredible team that we have. And the resilience of that team has been amazing. If you really think about the fact that in most of the jurisdictions, the government is recommending that everybody go stay home. We talk a lot about the incredible people who are on the front lines in hospitals and those types of things, but don't often talk about those that go to the airport every day and make sure that, are flying through, make sure that the people who really need to get to where they need to go for very essential reasons, which is really why people are traveling today, can do so. And so, as we've talked through with our team, it has been a day-to-day challenge. We're very lucky that we've been able to, as you mentioned, and I know we'll get to it, get some government support. But we've also gone out there and offered flexibility to our team. So what we've done is we've essentially put early out packages. We've put a number of different voluntary leaves, everywhere from 1 month all the way to 12 months. And, very happy to report that we've had over 39,000 team members take advantage of that. And that's really a voluntary program. So that certainly helped. But ultimately, we can never predict the future, and we certainly can't give any assurances. But we have a very, very strong goal, personal goal here at American, to try not to furlough anyone at the end of this, and we're doing everything we can. So really, at the end of the day, it's all about communication. It's about two-way communication, listening to what the team says, and being able to answer those questions as honestly as possible.
And knowing, I guess, the different parts of your business, and Tim, that brings me to you. Most people would think of Air Canada, just the passenger side. Your charge and purview is cargo, which maybe unpack what that part of the business is. It's not just shipping our Amazon packages. It's doing a lot of vital work. for those frontline workers in terms of personal protective equipment. But I imagine that business has gotten even more important and growing as the passenger business is essentially at a halt.
Yeah, thank you, Amber, and thanks for inviting me to be on with the Canada Club today. It's a great honor to be here. Thank you. Yeah, we've really changed our focus necessarily to the things we can do in this particular environment, and cargo is one of those. We move all kinds of things in a normal environment, things that you use every day, foods that you buy at the stores, goods, pharmaceuticals, and other materials, very common in the industry. But at this particular time, we're very focused on PPE equipment and gear. We're moving about 15 million masks a day into Canada, and for different government regulatory groups, hospitals, medical businesses, and private industry. We will continue to do that over the next, as long as we can possibly do it, and it's needed. And we're also continue to move pharmaceutical goods. And then underlying that, we continue to do repatriation flights. And a couple of those are really focused on our ability to continue to fly some of the passenger aircraft with passengers up top, with the cargo really fueling the whole airplane in terms of its cost, and us being able to therefore keep some planes flying that we can continue to move from places like Frankfurt and Paris and London and Hong Kong back into Canada. So it's a dual focus at the same time, but unusually so. The cargo is carrying the financial burden of doing that and able to do so, thankfully.
And Helane, for you, as you listen to how these operators have been dealing with the situation and attempting to pivot, you've been watching the airline sector and an analyst for the airline sector for over 30 years. And, it's a sector that used to love bankruptcies. It was an avid hobby for a lot of these airlines to go bankrupt. But then it really seemed over the past, call it 5 years, there was a big change in the industry. Signs of stability, sustained profitability. Warren Buffett invested in the sector. And so that was real seen as a seal of approval for stability. Then this happens. How damaging is that to the sector overall? And how do you think about a timeline? How do you possibly model what a stock should be trading at when there are so many variables?
Well, thanks. Thank you, Amber, for those questions. And, it's quite lovely to be here. And you speak of what I think of every day and every night and what's been giving me PTSD. To be frank, it's been very difficult. We were very early. As soon as the government in the United States grounded asked the airlines not to fly to Asia, we cut our numbers, and then we cut again when the airlines were asked not to fly to Europe. And then we cut again when they were asked not to fly to the UK or Ireland. And then we went through, what would recovery look like? Because we went through the liquidity profile of all the airlines, and with the government help, and unencumbered assets and what the debt markets were looking like, we thought and continue to think that none of the U.S. airlines would have to file for bankruptcy. And it's really difficult to think about the U.S. airlines filing for bankruptcy at this juncture for a variety of reasons. First of all, there's nothing they can do in bankruptcy at this point. If you look at, to your earlier point, the restructuring they did in the 2008 to say 2012-ish timeframe, and the consolidation that occurred, they've taken out all the high-cost debt. They don't have high-cost labor. In fact, we were looking at a situation over the next decade where roughly 23,000 pilots at American, Delta, and United alone were going to be retiring. And those are your high-cost, experienced pilots, that turned 65. And those were the only pilots that were turning 65. Pilots generally retire in their early 60s, somewhere between 62 and 63-ish, 64. And we can certainly talk about what's happening with all the pilots and flight attendants, others taking involuntary furlough, or rather voluntary furlough. But, our view with respect to the whole pilot situation is the airlines were going to have lower costs on labor because you were replacing pilots earning $335 an hour flying 777s and 787s with pilots that were going to be earning, say a 10-year pilot earning about $260 an hour. So you were seeing average pay actually going to decline over that time frame. You would see starting pay rise from about $90 an hour for first-year first officers, probably close to $100 to attract people to the profession. But you were going to have a really good cost profile. So you didn't have you don't have labor costs to cut other than through these voluntary leave and early out programs. You don't have high cost debt. I mean, the cost of capital over the past 5 to 7 years has been next to zero. American has been very aggressive specifically about refleeting, right? They placed an order for 472 aircraft in August of 2011, and they've taken delivery of those, spent $25 billion. They have one of the youngest, most fuel efficient fleets in the world right now. Air Canada did the same. I don't know the Sunwing fleet as well, but Air Canada replaced most of their entire wide body fleet with 787s, and we're working on replacing the narrow body fleet with the MAX before that was grounded. So you don't have a lot of ability to cut costs at this juncture. So bankruptcy is not an option. We need to get through this. So, that was like the next step we did was, what happens, and let's pick up the action in December of 2020 and see where we are, because we're going to assume that the group of airlines we cover in North America and South America, with one exception in South America, are going to make it through, and they're not going to file. And what are they going to look like, and what's the profile? And our view is that every recession or huge event over the past 2 decades, so 9/11, the Great Recession, has come with lower highs and lower lows. So that means it's taken longer for the industry to recover traffic, especially business traffic, after every big downturn. And we don't think this time is going to be an exception. It took almost 4 years for traffic to come back after 9/11. And we expect it to take 3 to 5 years for domestic traffic, and I'm going to just say all North America traffic to come back, and then international longer haul to take 5 to 7 years. And the reason we think it's going to be so long is borders will open at different rates. Whether or not you have to still quarantine when you go places will change. And, obviously you can't do a day trip if you're flying from one city to another city, like New York, which is I live in northern New Jersey, so we're on an indefinite work from home or whatever, stay at home order. And I've already been doing this for 8 weeks, and I assume I have another 5 or 6 weeks to go. But, going to Texas is an option because Texas is reopening. Going to Georgia is an option, but New York is still closed. So taking business trips is going to be very hard. We can get into the whole issue of people's personal balance sheets and whether or not they have the money to fly. But, our view is that the industry will get through this. It's very resilient. It's had to be. We come into it in a significantly better place. The industry was the best capitalized it had ever been in my entire, as you pointed out, 30 plus years of doing this. And they're just taking on, we just see it. The industry raised $11 billion of debt in the first quarter. They raised another $12 billion of debt this month. There's another $17 billion of debt that's being negotiated. I think worldwide, the world's airline industry has raised almost $100 billion. We need to get through this because, if we come out of this 30% smaller as we think at the end of the year than we were, and it always pains me to make these comments because there's a face behind every number, but we estimate close to 200,000 airline employees out of a base of 750 won't have jobs at the end of this year. And I know that's a big number, and I know there's a face to every number, and I know how painful it is. So I don't make that comment lightly, and I think it will be 5 to 7 years before we get back to last year's levels of traffic.
Let's throw that out to the group, to the operators. I'd love to get a sense, because the numbers that you put out there, Helane, are quite stark. And I think maybe people living their lives every day think, the minute this is lifted, that's it. I'm going back to normal. There's a lot of pent up. I'm going to Florida. I certainly say that a lot to my family as this winter in Canada has been dragging on. but 5 to 7 years of returning back to normal. How do the operators think of that? I guess maybe Mark, I'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks again, Amber. And the reality is we just don't know. We don't know how quickly this virus will go away. We don't know how quickly people will come back to flying. I agree with Helane that this is not going to go quickly back to normal. We're not going to snap our fingers in November and be operating at 100% of the capacity we were operating at before. But we're just modeling so many different scenarios right now because we don't know what the future will hold. We're looking at starting up in June or a July start or even a November start. And then, what's the fleet size going to look like? Is it 50% of what we had before, or is it going to be 65 or 70? Our bookings for the winter, surprisingly, for the vacation destinations remain really strong. In fact, we were booking ahead of last year at this point. But I don't believe the lates will come in. I believe the capacity will need to be reduced. And every airline is going to have to think about how they're going to manage through this. And every airline has a different challenge. Right? Sunwing does very little frequency to places like Cancun. We might do a daily flight or 4 or 5 flights a week. And we can easily cut that back. When I think about a business airline like an Air Canada or American, where in many of the routes you need frequency to attract customers, how do you manage a route like Toronto, Montreal, where people are expecting 12 or 14 flights a day when the volume of passengers traveling is 50% of what it was before? So each airline's going to have to go through this in their own way. Each one of them is going to have to be creative about thinking about solutions that will work. And I've been in this industry for more than 30 years as well. And you talk about resilience. This industry is all of that. And I agree. We've had some good years before this happened. And I think it's a terrible situation to be in. We're all dealing with massive layoffs of our staff. As you said, every one of those is a face. And a company like Sunwing, a small company, I know most of the employees personally. And having to lay everyone off is a really difficult thing to do. But you have to protect the future. We have to be thinking about where we go when we come out of this and model scenario after scenario in a really uncertain time.
Jim, what do you think of that time frame?
Yeah, I've also been in the industry almost 30 years, and I will say that that I've never seen anywhere near a more difficult environment to forecast. Right? I cannot ever remember a time when we had no idea what really should be the right capacity 8 weeks from now, much less when we're going to get back to the size that we were before. And based on what we're seeing at this point in the short term, we've reduced capacity for April and May about 80%. And we're expecting in June to reduce capacity about 70%, but we are keeping the flexibility to be able to adjust. In the longer term, I think it's very clear we're going to be a smaller airline for a good time period. We don't know what that time period is now, but we have accelerated the retirement of a number of our fleet types, actually 4 different fleet types, which we had flying a little longer than this, and we went ahead and accelerated the retirements of the 757, the 767, our E190 fleet, and our wide-body A330-300 fleets. So that has given us a little more flexibility and ability to look into the future. We still have some other things that we continue to evaluate. I think what we do know is we have a strong belief that, as Helene and others have said, that domestic is going to come back before international. That was very clear at the beginning, just because of the triage that we had to do in order to make sure that we had the right procedures in place as people were trying to travel between 2 locations. Really, and if you think about it, this really started, we started to notice it at the beginning of the year with downturns in China. Then that spread to more of Asia. Later on, we saw the downturns in Europe, and after that, we saw them in Latin America. And it really ebbed and flowed. And part of the problem was that every government was making individual decisions on who could travel, when they could travel. Did it mean that there would be a quarantine? Did it mean that that was government imposed or that was self-imposed? And, our team actually had a very difficult time implementing all the changes and keeping up with what it meant so that when you checked in at the airport, we could make sure that you were valid to travel. If you envision that environment is more confusing to the customer. And so I think there's a need as we go forward to have a little more stability across different governments to make sure that we're able to prepare, communicate as well as possible, and start to give customers the confidence that it is okay to travel from a regulatory perspective. The flip side of that, of course, is all of us on this call and many others have a strong duty now to make sure that customers understand the safety of the industry. We've always seen our duty as being explaining the flight safety of the industry, and I think customers took for granted what they now see as a new part of safety, which is the cleanliness and all of the protections that are there when you travel. And it's really imperative that we're able to communicate those, work together, and create an environment where the customer sees the airline industry as a very, very safe thing to go do. As that happens, they'll be more willing to travel. They'll be more willing to travel longer distances, and we'll start to see. So sorry I didn't have a good answer to where we think how long it will take to come back, but it is changing day by day, and we're making sure we're ready for it.
Well, I'm almost afraid to know the answer to this question. I think as many kind of write off the summer, the next important travel season, not only for airlines, but just for people, is the holidays. Is what could Christmas look like? Do you guys have that conversation? I guess, Tim, I'll ask you. Maybe that leaves you in the position of being the Grinch and telling Christmas.
I think by Christmas you will see a significant amount of flying again. I will say that, to Helane's question earlier, we're probably taking the most pessimistic view as we build forward, so that we are in position to react to that rather than pull back from it. So I think there's a mix of how you get there for all of us. But I do think the fourth quarter will be flying to most places around the world, and certainly domestically. But it will be lesser numbers of flights, lesser opportunities to choose, 9 times a day to go to a city in Europe, perhaps, and perhaps more connectivity with our alliance partners for the final leg into some destinations where we would have been flying direct previously. So I think you'll see a different connectivity with the airlines, but I think hopefully the globe will open up. I think a lot of that will depend on whether there is a vaccine or not, or a medicine that counters the virus. I think those two elements are absolutely key when we look forward to to predict what the networks are going to look like late this year. I don't think we're going to be anywhere near 70 to 100% at the end of this year, but I think we'll be on the road to recovery.
And Helane, we were talking about this in the pre-call, but you said it's one thing to fly there, but when you get there, what are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, that's important. It's one thing to fly to Orlando, but once you get to Orlando, is Disney World or Universal open? So you have to have something to do when you get there. And that's part of why, the guys were talking about different reopening issues. And that's one big one of them, right? It's do you want to take everybody? I think everybody wants to get out of their homes, or as I call it, my paradise prison. I love my house, but 24/7 for 8 weeks in a row has been pretty brutal. And I do get out, go for a walk, but it's been pretty, I miss travel. I'll just put that out there. I miss getting on a plane and going somewhere, because there is something amazing to me about waking up in New York, or in my case, northern New Jersey, and going to sleep in London, which I was supposed to go to tomorrow night for my birthday, or going to Hong Kong or somewhere really awesome. And there's so much of the world is awesome. And the airline industry serves a really important purpose that people forget about. Trade is really important. The industry, promotes trade. The industry promotes well-being among people, and understanding among people, right? It's so important when we go to different cultures from the leisure perspective. It's so important that airlines fly to these destinations, because it promotes well-being between different types of people, different, all sorts of people. So, the industry definitely needs to come back, and I think the governments are starting to realize it, led by, all of the various lobbying organizations like Transport Canada and AFRA, IATA, and so on, and the encouragement for the airlines that how important they are to doing all the things that we were talking about. And I just think in general, I'm hoping that there's pent up demand, but I want to see stuff open too. We have to. You can't go to London and quarantine for 14 days, right? If your vacation was going to be a long weekend and you go and it doesn't work, and that doesn't compute that way. So we need to just get all of these governments on the same page to kind of open things up. Obviously, everybody wants to do it safely because nobody wants the recurrence of cases. In the U.S., when foreign students, international students, I guess, were sent home, they brought with them a whole second wave of infection into China. So, there was that to consider. But yeah, we have to have stuff open. And I think you're seeing that, gradually. Europe is working on it. The southern states in the United States are working on it. So we're starting to see people encourage it. And I think as that happens, people might feel comfortable flying. Certainly the visiting friends and relatives, I think, will happen first. I don't know what the guys think, but I think that's first. And then leisure travel. And remember, in the United States, there's 26 million people who filed for unemployment claims over the past 6 weeks. And there was another, I think, 3.5 or so million this morning, 3.8 million this morning. Over the last week. So you've got a lot of people who aren't working right now, and they're worried about paying their rent or catching up if they're lucky enough to be able to defer. You're worried about them. They're worried about repaying, catching up on utilities. Everything's going on the credit card is how I'm fond of saying it. And that bill will come due. And unlike governments, we can't print money. We have to pay our bills. And going to Disney World is not on anybody's top list of things to do right now. It's putting food on the table, buying kids clothes because your kids outgrow clothes, pretty quickly, and getting caught up on bills. And studies show that when you get laid off or something like this happens to you, your relationship with money changes. And this is going to inform leisure travel over the next few years. And this is partly why we're so, why we have such a long L tail for recovery. People who go through this, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, people who go through this spend a lot of time, spend the next 2 to 2.5 years kind of rebuilding their savings. So, it's just going to be a long road.
Well, you're speaking really eloquently to the demand side of things and kind of the hurdles that we have to get through for people to take that step to get on a plane. And Jim, you highlighted this, and maybe you can flesh it out a little bit more before we move on to the role of government, is once you decide you've overcome all those hurdles, and once you've decided, okay, I feel comfortable, I'm going to fly, what do you say to passengers? How do you guarantee that they're not going to get sick when they get on that flight?
Yeah, really, it's all about education. So first of all, to be frank, over the past 8 weeks or so, as we've learned more about the virus and the risks of that virus, we took a completely new look at how we clean airplanes, how we clean airports, the importance of the fact that it be repetitive for every single flight. And frankly, we're rolling out completely new procedures that are disinfecting all the parts of the aircraft that a customer touches before every flight. And before this, while that disinfection happened, it tended to happen more in an overnight, and then the flight flew and you disinfected again. And so we're having to, if you really think about it, we're having to think about the entire process of the journey of an aircraft throughout the day, because we've now added a completely new bill of work. With some of that, we can add with extra people. But others of it, we're having to make sure that we're building in, being more efficient in the boarding and the deplaning part, so we can make up for more time that now is going to be used to make sure the customers have a very safe aircraft to get onto. I like to think of it both from a customer perspective and our team members' perspective as two steps. Number one, you have to make sure that a customer is safe. And number two, you have to make sure that they feel safe. And both of those are equally important. And so, there's a number of things that we're doing right now, not only improving the cleaning that we do on the aircraft, not only strengthening the disinfectants and fogging aircraft, but we're now starting to provide PPE to all of our customers as they get on an airplane. And for the month of May, we're actually limiting the number of people that you'll see on an airplane. So we're blocking about half of the center seats on the aircraft, and we're going to make sure that there is space within the aircraft. And then we're educating our team members, our flight attendant, our gate agents, on the improvements that we've made to cleaning and that sort of thing. But it really, at the end of the day, now that I truly believe that this cleanliness has moved from maybe a product attribute to a true piece of safety, I get back to it's incumbent on the entire industry as a whole to convince passengers that we are as safe as we are in this area as well. Because ultimately, you go through a number of steps of the journey. We can control a lot of them, but not all of them. And we want to make sure that we can show customers that it is incredibly safe to travel throughout the network. And that helps bring back travelers. And once they come back, we will compete heavily to make sure they come to American versus others. And that's what this industry is really good at.
I do want to talk about government support with the time that we have left, as well as get to some of the questions that have been coming in. But on that point, what Jim was just talking about, Tim or Mark, is there anything that you wanted to add, or is it? Are you doing the same, Tim?
One thing I'd like to add, Amber, is at Air Canada, we actually are requiring all passengers to wear a mask. And I would say in the multiple meetings we have a day with the executive officer staff, that it centers around this cleanliness issue, this making it safe for the passenger to get on board, to bringing them back because they can have confidence in what we're doing. That is the absolute center focus of almost all our product discussions at this point. And so I agree with what Jim said, and I think the whole industry will be working in tandem with one another, really, to make sure that it's good no matter what airplane you're on anywhere in the world. And I think that's just the central issue for us right now.
So I guess whenever this recovery is, you want to make sure that you're around for it. That brings us back to survival, and that brings us back to what can the government do in terms of supporting this industry. Mark, it sounds like you have been in a lot of contact with the government about what that kind of package might look like for your industry and for Sunwing in particular. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. And first off, I have to say, I think the federal government has done a really great job managing through this, as have the provinces. The focus of the federal government initially was on the safety and well-being of Canadians in general. And that's where the focus should have been. It was putting a safety net for people, making sure they could continue to put food on the table. So implementing these CERB program as part of the employment insurance initiatives, or the CEWS program, which was helping companies with a significant drop in revenue to keep people on payroll, whether that was in an active role or even in an inactive role, where we were able to flow through benefits from the government quickly to look after our staff. So I'm really appreciative of the fact that that was their first focus. Now I believe the attention should turn and start talking about focus on support to various industries that need it. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the oil and gas sector and the impact this has had on that sector of the economy, but clearly there isn't a sector that's been impacted more by this than the aviation industry, and we really do need support. Everyone's gone from cash coming in from customers flying to nothing, and there needs to be liquidity put into the system to help everyone manage through. And as Helane said, the companies are in a good position right now to manage through this, but it's not reasonable to expect that any airline in Canada can go on like this for 6 months without getting some kind of financial support from the government. And we've been working with the other airlines together collaboratively to try and come up with solutions that are fair and equitable and treat all the airlines the same. The government shouldn't be picking winners or losers here. They need to support the industry as a whole.
Are you optimistic that's
as well? You think about the northern carriers and the issues that they have, and continuing to require flights into indigenous communities where the only way to get a product in and out is by air. And then a company like Sunwing that's doing leisure traffic, but still important part of the economy. We employ 3,000 people. And then you take a flag carrier like Air Canada that all have different roles, but the entire industry needs support.
Are you optimistic that that's forthcoming?
I am. I believe, I know the government's working on supporting the industry, and I'm optimistic that they'll find a solution because I believe they have to.
Tim?
I think that similarly, I think that, we are pleased with what the government's done in terms of the employee side of things, the CEWS program. And we think that there's more to be done there, hopefully. And we look forward to that. And we are optimistic that the government will decide to make some kind of a funds available to the airlines, however that may happen. And we, like has been said, we are in discussions with them now, obviously, and we'll see how that comes out in the end.
Jim, I'm really curious about the American experience. Obviously, being here in Canada, and history will be the ultimate judgment of this, but there does seem to be a lot of cohesiveness at the federal and provincial level, and kind of whatever it takes attitude on the part of the federal government that puts politics aside. Just from watching the news of the U.S., it doesn't appear that that's a similar approach that's being taken. How would you characterize the government's support, either at the state or federal level?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the question. First of all, there's the CARES Act within the United States, which we were heavily involved in discussing with the government when this first started, and I'm very pleased that it came forward and really provided some of the short-term liquidity needs that the industry has, both through a payroll support grant and then through loans that are available. And we've already taken advantage of the payroll support grant and are expecting to receive funds from the loans as well. So from a short-term liquidity perspective, I think we've been very pleased. I think Doug Parker, our CEO, this morning talked a lot about the partnership that we've had with the U.S. Treasury, and frankly, we've been incredibly pleased with how the government has stepped up and worked with us in partnership to ensure that we are able to guarantee jobs to our team over the next number of months. And they've done so, for that purpose, also to make sure that the United States has the connectivity domestically that's necessary for essential workers to get around, and it really allows us to look a little more into the future. As far as the partnership, we're taking that day by day. As I mentioned earlier, we are, one of the challenges of operating right now is that we have the CDC and the WHO, which make recommendations as to things like cleanliness and health and how people should be traveling, and we have stayed in lockstep with that. So as the CDC has changed their recommendations, we have equally gone and made adjustments to what we do. A great example of that was the CDC early on was not recommending, in fact, recommending against using masks. And as soon as they changed and said, no, actually, there's a benefit to masks, within about a day, we announced to our team that we're diving into the supply chain to make sure that it's all available. But it is a challenging operating environment because there are not only state governments, but local governments at the city level that are changing what they expect in their jurisdictions every day. So whether it be customers are required to wear masks in certain places, whether it be quarantine needs, within the United States, there are very specific quarantine requirements where if you travel to Texas, as an example, from a number of different states, you are required to quarantine for 14 days. The airline doesn't have to implement a lot there, but we have to make sure every single one of those flights now is handing out different things to passengers. So I do think the government is heavily engaged in understanding as we go from the shrinking stage to the growing stage because of the importance of commerce that the airline industry brings. There's an understanding that there needs to be a little more partnership there to make sure that we can all work together and we can implement and convince our customers that it's not only safe to fly, but from a regulatory perspective, they can fly as well. So I'm hopeful.
We've got about 10 minutes left. We're getting a lot of great questions, so I want to make sure we get to those, and we'll do it kind of in a rapid fire because some of them are targeted towards some of the panelists. So as I collect those, Helane, I just want to ask you a question. Maybe you give me like a 60-second answer. Mark brought this up about the oil and gas industry and how much they've been hit. But I wonder how much of it, I guess you have to really squint to see the silver linings, but how much help lower fuel prices are providing to this industry at this time?
It's a tailwind, that's for sure. Jet fuel cost per gallon a year ago was about $2, and right now it's 40 cents. Wow. So that is a great tailwind and very beneficial for the airlines in the short term. So I guess if you want to look for the silver lining, there is that. It helps in lowering costs because as the guys pointed out, revenue is down 90% year over year, and costs are not down 90% year over year. So we got to do our best to get costs down. And certainly $2 billion in cost savings in a quarter is going to help a whole lot.
Right. This question is for all the operators. And I'll start with you, Jim, because you were the one who sort of talked about, so if you're not flying full planes and you're going to be staggering people for who knows how long, what does that mean for ticket prices? Are people going to be paying more for flight travel? Expenses like making sure the plane is safe and clean go up.
Yeah, I mean, in the short term, look, there's not a lot of people flying. I think we've said that, the vast majority of our flights have less than a 25% load factor. And so right now we need to encourage people to try. It's a supply and demand issue. So, competitively, we're very competitive in our prices, and I think customers can see that out there. Yet to be seen going forward, obviously. It's the beauty of this industry from a consumer perspective is that it's highly competitive, and we're going to make sure that the customers have a viable solution to getting where they need to go. And so, yet to be seen. What we really want is people to start coming back at this point and being willing to travel. So we're spending a whole lot more time right now on just assuring them of the safety of it.
Mark, what's your view on ticket prices?
Yeah, it's a competitive marketplace, and if your competitors are charging $100 for a ticket, even though the plane's half full and our costs are higher, we're going to have to be selling tickets at the same price as everybody else. So, I don't think the ticket prices are going to go up fourfold if we have a 25% load factor. It's just not realistic, and that'll impact demand. But as Jim said before, it's a matter of showing people the safety of traveling, and it's not just on the airplane; it's through the whole process of getting to the airport, curbside, even from your Uber to the airport to check in, security screening, all of those touch points. We need to be comfortable and show the perception of safety to people. It has to be safe. People have to be aware of the safety in what you're doing. I'm not sure particularly that leaving an empty seat between two people on an airplane really is going to have a significant impact on how safe you are aboard the plane from getting a virus. I think there's other steps that we need to take, and people need to understand what they are and what the risks are to get people to want to come back and fly.
Tim, one question that we've got is about closed air circulation in the planes and whether that's going to have to be something. I don't pretend to know how that works, but is that something that can possibly be changed?
I'm not an HVAC person per se, but in the maintenance world on the aircraft, there definitely is one of the issues that we are working with right now, and we are aware of that one and acknowledge that that's one of the things that we have to readjust to make the flight safe again.
Mark, this question comes in just for you. Wanting to know about the developing nations that Sunwing flies to, how they are handling this outbreak, and so many communities that you fly to rely on travel as their main industry. How have they been affected?
Yeah, clearly, if you look at the countries we fly to, a lot of small Caribbean island countries, they rely almost exclusively on tourism. But they're making the same steps we're doing in North America to say, regardless of that, the safety of our citizens is of the most importance. And we need to shut down this tourism industry for a period of time to keep our residents safe. And I applaud them for doing that. Each one of them is in a unique situation. Sometimes the hospital system is not as well structured or set up. But I think it's going to be really important for those countries to start getting tourism back. But again, it's a matter of making sure it's safe to do so first. A lot of these islands have actually had very few cases of COVID. And their bigger concern was having tourists come in and infecting the residents while they're bringing the tourists into the country. So understandably, they wanted to stop that. But I believe that they're going to turn to how can we promote this again. I believe they'll be looking to say, how can we support the hoteliers on these islands, either through direct funding or marketing, to try and get these industries back up again.
Helane, do you think about the industry facing a recruitment challenge? There's a lot of students looking for jobs right now, but I imagine all of a sudden being a pilot or an air host or hostess seems a lot more dangerous than it did before. Is this a member of the airline team that's going to garner higher wages as a result of, more hazardous work environment? How do you think about those things?
I don't think it's more dangerous. Tourism and hospitality have been one of the fastest growing industries over the last decade, provides 5% of GDP. So it's a big employer. I think people should still consider it as a career because it's kind of a good career. It's not, I want to go back to something we've talked around about. This is not the airline industry's fault. This is not travel and tourism's fault. In my opinion, you could argue that it is because we bring people all over the world, but it's not their fault that governments around the world close their borders. I think the takeaway from this should be sustainability is really important. We haven't talked about ESG in a long time, and last year and the year before is a big focus. I think from a climate perspective, this is really important. And I think the third thing is we have to be mindful that I guess these pandemics occur. We did have H1N1, we had SARS, we had MERS, and the only difference is it wasn't as ubiquitous as this particular one is. And I think the way to think about it is it's still a good career and it's still a long-lived career. It's just we're going through a little bit of a downturn or a lot of a downturn right now. And, things will get better. This too, I have to be optimistic. This too shall pass.
Okay, I like that. I'd actually like to end on an optimistic note. We only have about 2 minutes left. I'll just go across the remaining panelists, Tim, Jim, and Mark. Tim, I'll start with you. I'd just like to know what gives you hope.
Sure thing. One of the leading indicators, did you say Jim or Tim? Excuse me.
Tim, yeah.
Okay. One of the leading indicators of the health of an economy is transportation. Air transportation's usually been a leader into a recession and out. And we see parts moving around for manufacturing plants now. We're moving coffee pods from Switzerland to Sydney right now. We're getting ready to move retail goods from clothing manufacturers into North America. These are companies that only make these moves when they think there's an economy coming back behind it. So that makes me very optimistic. And I'm on the optimistic side of the industry anyway, as well as personally. So yeah, I am optimistic that we are in the beginning steps of a rebound.
Tim?
Yeah, first of all, I'll echo what Tim just said. We're operating the first cargo-only flights in 38 years at American, and we can't add them fast enough for the amount of goods that are moving. Of course, some of that is PPE, but a lot of it isn't. And we're even moving seeds north and south to and from South America because there is an expectation of robust demand. So a lot of that is coming in. The other thing I would say is we talk to our customers every single week, and we survey them on what their feelings are. And one of the first questions we ask is, how concerned are you about this virus? And while there's still a huge chunk of people that are in the most concerned category, over the past 2 weeks, we've seen a good drop in folks being most concerned about it. So that's the beginning of people being willing to travel, and I'm hopeful we'll start seeing that.
Mark, I'll give the last 15 seconds to you.
Okay, thanks, Amber. I'm an optimist by nature, and this is an amazing industry. The aviation industry is a challenging one. There's always things coming at you and always different things that you have to think about. What it does is it attracts people to the industry that are intelligent, creative, and adaptable. And because we've got all these people working for all of our great companies, we're in a great position to manage whatever gets thrown at us. No one ever expected this, but we will find a way out of it. And I'm looking forward to the future.
All right, from your lips, Mark, thank you so much to Helane, Jim, and Tim. A fascinating, candid discussion, and we appreciate everybody who took time to join us. Anita, back to you.
Thank you all for that interesting discussion about the future of air travel. I am feeling more optimistic than I did an hour ago. I'd like to thank each of our panelists for helping us understand what you're doing specifically to help our North American airlines succeed past the virus. Your expertise and willingness to participate in this format is greatly appreciated. And Amber, thank you for your skilled moderation. We always appreciate having you at the club. So we wish all of you the best of luck in the months to come. In terms of upcoming events, we hope that you can join us next Thursday, May 7th, when we're going to have a panel to discuss food supply chain and food security. Thank you to our AV supplier, Van Valkenburg Communications and livemeeting.ca, Canada's online event space, for making it possible for us to come together today. Thanks for joining us. Stay healthy and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.